said evolution is a proper scientific theory. Can you tell me what's necessary for something to be a scientific theory?
Yeah, you have to start with a hypothesis and then test it
Wrong.
and then repeat it, and then you
No.
have to submit it to other scientific to the scientific community for inquiry
Okay.
and then
Hmm.
comparison, and then there's a consensus that's formed around the theory,
Uh-huh.
and it's not a permanent theory. It's just the current understanding, and it's
Hmm.
subject to further testing and
Okay.
retraction eventually. It's not
Okay.
something that's static.
Okay. You got most of that right, but before you could do a hypothesis, what do you start with?
What do you start with?
Yeah. Before
Well,
you
you
can do a
start with a.
hypothesis.
I guess you start with a question.
Well, a question about what?
Well, whatever it is that you're wanting to think about or study.
Wait, think about is there something that has to take place, like
Well,
an observation, before you can actually
yeah,
ask a
yeah,
question? Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah. You have to be
observation,
intelligent.
great.
Yeah,
No, no,
yeah.
no. Observation is a first step of the scientific method in natural science. So
Okay.
the reason evolution doesn't pass the test for being a scientific theory is that you just almost fully described the scientific method. Scientific theory is the end result of the scientific method and only the end result of the scientific method. So what is the observation in evolution? Well, the first step of the scientific method, what is it?
What is the? I'm not sure. I'm sure you're leading me somewhere. Why don't you just tell me where you're leading me so we can get there?
Where I'm leading you is for something to be a scientific theory, it has to pass the scientific method, right? The scientific method starts with an observation, a viable hypothesis, an experiment, a repeated experiment, observation of the experiment, and then you can come up with a theory that says X causes Y, and that's or you can nullify it. You could say our concept, our hypothesis is actually wrong, which is just as valuable in science as it being right. So if that's the case, and you said evolution is a proper scientific theory, if evolution was a proper scientific theory, you could take me through the scientific method that we both just agreed exists, and
Yeah.
you could start with an observation and walk me through, and the audience, what's the observation, the first step of the scientific method in regards to evolution? What's the observation?
Well, I guess one of the first observations was the similarity between species and the drawings that were done by that Longbeard guy back in the 1800s that
Okay.
boated around the Galapagos. That
Okay, so
guy,
you're saying the
he made some
observation.
he
Okay,
made some
one at a time, dude. I got it.
observations. Yeah,
I got
yeah.
it, dude. You don't have to tell me a whole story. Okay, the observation is similarities in species, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. If the observation is similarities in species, what is the viable hypothesis?
Well, there could be several of them. One of them is that one person made them all, and another one is that they came from the same origin or source, and over time changed into different species.
Okay, so your observation is that there's similarities of these animals, and now you're saying what caused the similarities in the animals is similarities in the animals.
Well, no, similarities in a combined source, a source that was the same amongst all of them, a family tree.
Is that synonymous with similar? So your observation is these things are similar. Your hypothesis is what caused them to be similar is that there's previous similar things.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And okay. So if your hypothesis is that similar things cause similarities, how are you going to do the scientific method if your observation is similar things and your hypothesis is that similar things cause similar things?
Well, you can observe that in the study of genetics.
No. How do you do a test? Yeah, how do you
Yeah,
do a test
yeah.
that shows that
The way Gregor Mendel did when he looked at genetic changes over time between different generations.
Okay, hold on a second. So, how do you determine that the long process you call evolution, that's how many millions of years old, that the similarities caused similarities?
Well, you can. People have studied the fossil record, and people have studied shorter term changes in species over time, because we don't have a time machine to be able to go back and directly observe the changes. There's inference involved.
Got you. So the part that you're extrapolating to the past is not within the scientific method, and what you're saying is that what you did as the scientific method, right? You observed similarities in species, right? In this case, the long-bearded guy was studying finches, most notoriously, finches and the changes in their beaks or whatever. These are, under my view, these are changes of things within a species, within a group, and doesn't change the species itself. But it sounds like you're saying the similarities in these finches is caused by previous things that they came from, right?
Yeah, that's part of what.
So what's how did you test that the similarities among finches was caused by a previous species that wasn't a finch that caused them to be similar? How did you determine that?
Well, humans have been messing around with that for thousands of years with their dog breeding, which is why I brought up dogs.
No,
it's pretty well documented.
No,
it's pretty well documented that a totally separate species,
Anson,
a totally separate species was made from a different species, and it's very similar.
Okay, so now you're saying that a mind was necessary, because that's all engineering and breeding shows, is that a person with intent can manipulate the mustard seed and the dog breeds to make a variation. Hold on. Does that produce similarity or variation?
Well, both.
Hold on. Okay, wait a second. Your observation was similarities among species. Your experiment produces dissimilarities.
Well, it also produces similarities, even though dogs aren't exactly like a wolf. They're very similar.
Focus. Your observation was similarities among species, right?
Yeah, amongst different species.
Okay, hold on, one at a time. If your observation is similarities among species, and I ask you, what's your evidence? What's your experiment for that? And you point to dog breeding, which produces dissimilarities, variation.
Yeah, but it also produces similarities.
Okay, so now your observation is similarities and dissimilarities,
right?
Yeah,
because different species are. They vary.
Did you, to do that experiment, did you have to start with a species that already has similarities?
Yeah, you did. The Russians did studies on this with foxes.
Hold on, dude. Stop it. If you started with the thing in question, we're asking you, how did you get the thing that you started with? You're saying, well, we start with the thing we have, and then we breed them. Yeah, no, not yeah. That's not the scientific method. If you're saying what we have now is produced by and caused by previous things that wasn't that, but it was similar. I asked you, how did you get the dog in this case? If you're going to point to dog breeding, I'm asking you, how did you get the initial dog that you could breed? Because the thing, if a dog exists, it's similar to other dogs, right? There's a dog that exists that's similar to other dogs. Okay, hold on. The question is, how did you produce that dog from non-dog?
Right. So I can tell you an experiment that the Soviets did, where they took foxes and selectively bred them and made them into barking animals. So they started with
Are you dense? You're just swapping out what a fox and a dog is. I'm asking a different question. How did you get the fox itself to start with, if that's the thing in question?
Right.
By the way, let me ask you a simple question. Hold on, you're not listening.
I got it.
You're not listening. Is it true or false that to say there's a category called a fox, you've already have a category of animals, in their population are already similar, right?
Yeah.
Foxes are like foxes.
Yeah.
The question isn't, can you take a thing that's already has its similarity among populations and breed it to have some sort of dissimilarity while maintaining some similarity? That's not what's in question. What's in question is, how did you produce the similarity that you call the category of a fox or a dog or a finch from something previous, right, in the evolutionary perspective?
Well, we all started from the same source.
That's question begging. What was that? Is it a glob?
No, we all started from the.
Is a blob?
No, well, it was
banana.
Non.
Yes, it was.
It was a non-living object. We started from the same non-living object.
Wait, what's the non-living object we started from?
Well, that's an excellent question. I don't know. I wasn't there for that.
Well, then why are you claiming that happened?
Because it makes the most logical sense. If you want to
It
believe,
makes sense.
it
Hold on.
does. If you want
Okay,
to believe
it
evolution is
makes
real.
it makes sense to you that inanimate, unliving, unrelated objects, right, or a singular object, produced livingness to itself, and then livingness produced consciousness, and that process also included reproductive capacity. So, what's the
You got it. Yeah.
non-living? Hold on. What's the non-living object that produced a replicator?
Well, it was a highly complex non-living object that was in an
Wow.
environment where it was able to make copies of itself and sustain
Yeah.
itself over enough time to the point where
Okay.
its complexity was able to
Okay.
spring into life.
That's a beautiful story. That didn't tell me
Yeah.
what that object is.
And no
Hey,
one
Josh,
has
do you
ever
want?
shown
Yeah.
anything,
What is that?
nothing even approximating what you're saying in very controlled systems. Someone already in the chat mentioned the problem of monochirality. Right? You have these arrangements that simply are not found anywhere outside of already existing systems, and no one knows how to get there ab initio in controlled.
Well, that's not true.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so NASA has done some work on this, and they actually found a few pools out in the West that contain arsenic-based life forms that aren't carbon-based like we are, that are basic strands of RNA that are in kind of a primordial ooze of a different kind of alien life than what currently exists on the Earth. So actually, this is something that we've already discovered.
What? What? Wait. What? How did you get RNA?
It just sprang up out of non-living
Oh, that's
objects.
amazing. That's a great story.
Yeah.
It sprang. Is that a scientific term? I don't know.
Spring into life. Yeah.
A sprang up is that in the is
Yeah.
that what they're teaching in science now? The sprang
Yeah,
up.
it's part of our theosis.